So last time we were seeing the royal convoy, the retinue, the entourage, whatever you want to call it, approaching the hermitages of the rishis and of course of Vymasena, Satyavan's father, where they are staying in the Shalva woods. The poet describes in a very beautiful manner and brings out something very vividly for the whole place, scenic, charming, attractive, at the same time as if filled with spiritual peace, a spiritual vastness, a spiritual depth because of the evening dusk which is approaching. In a broad eve, with one red eye of cloud, through a narrow opening, a green flowered cleft out of the stair of sky and soil, they came into a mighty home of emerald dusk, into a mighty home of emerald dusk. This is the group of hermitages where the convoy is arriving. Now this day has been left undefined, but obviously the connotation, the reference is very clear. It means that the royal party is taking Savitri to her new place of dwelling, where they will leave her and go back to their kingdom. And Savitri will continue to stay in the hermitage with her husband and with her parents-in-law. So that day has a reference to the royal convoy. Now, it is not very clear yet whether this day also includes Savitri's parents, Ashwapati and Malavi. The poet has kept it kind of hanging, but it is understood that they certainly are also taking Savitri to the new place. That is made very explicit in the original story of the Mahabharata. Savitri being taken to the hermitage. That we could see separately, but first let us see the description we have in Shevendo's epic. They are onward, led by a faint, brooding path, which toiled through the shadow of enormous trunks, and under arches, masses of sunshine, they saw low thatched roofs of a hermitage huddled between a patch of azure blue. In the sunlit clearing, the stream, the outbreak of a glad smile in the forest's monstrous heart, a rude refuge of the thought and will of man, washed by the towering giants of the wood. It's a thick forest, but there is a small opening somewhere, and through that opening, the sunlight comes on the hermitages. Hermitages, what we would call parnakutis, made of dry leaves, small sheds made of dry leaves, where the rishis and the ascetics and their disciples would stay. We toil through the shadow of enormous trunks, so you can have an idea how thick the forest is, that through those branches of the trees, it is difficult for the sunlight to penetrate. They saw low thatched roofs of a hermitage from a distance. They had started now just kind of glimpsing the group of cottages where they should be going. Huddled beneath a patch of azure hue in a sunlit clearing, the same, the outbreak of a glad smile in the forest mourns the surf. So again, there is a suggestion here that this is a place which will open out to the sunlight, to the new light, to the new dawn, to the new possibilities, to the new spiritual life which will arrive pretty soon. The rude refuge of the thought and will of man, watched by the crowding giants of the wood, huge trees, must have been very old trees also there, and they are not only watching, they are guarding the whole place. Arrived in that rough-hewn homestead, they gave, questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, the pride and loved one to the great blind king. A regal pillar of foreign mightiness, and the stately Kevan woman, once a queen, who now hoped nothing for herself from life, but all things only hoped for her one child, calling with a single head from partial fate all joy of earth, all heaven's beatitude. So the convoy has arrived at the hermitage where Bhimasena and his wife Shabhyam are staying. Arrived in that rough-hewn homestead, they handed over Savitri to them, to her parents-in-law. Homestead is a house, an immovable property with farms and trees and gardens around. It is something which stays as a unit. So in the legal language, when the transactions of transfer of property are done, then the specification is that it is the fixed property which will be handed from one party to the other party, not the other movable assets like cows, horses, animals, or whatever are possessed by the first owner. So it is in that homestead now Savitri is moving. It must have been a fairly large space with a big piece of land all around where the hermitage is located. But it is a rough-hewn homestead, rough-hewn. This is again a very purposeful description. Obviously, Savitri is going to live in the forest, in difficult surroundings, in a household where there are no urban luxuries. She is a princess, and suddenly now she has to live in a hut. That contrast is there of transition from one type of life to the other. And therefore, the poet is pointing it out, look, till yesterday she was living in a royal palace like a princess. But now she'll be living here in a low, rough-hewn cottage. Arrived in that rough-hewn homestead, they gave, questioning no more the strangeness of her fate. They had already reconciled themselves about the choice Savitri had made. She had told her parents, yes, this is done. I am not going to change my mind. I have chosen Satyavan as my life's partner, and I know how to change my fate. So questioning no more. They are not challenging her decision at all. questioning no more the strangeness of her fate. Why strangeness? Again, the same contrast. She is a royal princess. She is a well-cultured lady. She is a boon which has come from the divine himself, and now she has to go and live a kind of a lonely life, ascetic life, without the royal trappings around her, no servants, no luxuries, nothing of that kind. Questioning no more the strangeness of her fate. That is the strangeness of her fate. This is a girl who was living in luxury and now she has to live in a hut. That is the strangeness of her fate, which they are not anymore questioning. Questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, their pride and loved one to the great blind king. Obviously, they were very proud of the daughter of this girl, this princess, flaming bright in the palace, moving with anklet bells while going from place to place in the palace. They are not now questioning all those things. That is why she was a loved girl, loved daughter, but all that is left behind. Their pride and loved one to the great blind king. So they are handing her over to Satyavan's father. He is the patriarch, and it is he who has to take the responsibility of Savitri in terms of her life in the hermitage. Questioning no more the strangeness of her fate, the pride and loved one to the great blind king, a regal pillar of foreign mightiness and stately careworn woman, once a queen, so too her parents-in-law, great blind king, and a careworn woman, once a queen, to them Savitri is being handed over by the royal parents, Ashwapati and the queen Malavi. That is the brief description of the ceremony, so to say, of the two families joining together. And a stately careworn woman, once a queen, Satyavan himself had described to Savitri about the mightiness of his father, the kingdom he possessed, but blind fate had snatched away his eyesight, and with that came calamity and misfortune. His enemy took the opportunity to defeat him and drive him away from his kingdom, and therefore he was staying as an exile in the hermitages here. Therefore, a great blind king and a careworn woman, once a queen, careworn. Once she was of course a queen, but now she has a care. What care? In the hermitage, in the ascetic space, in the company of the rishis who had given up all attachments to life. What care does she have? She still has a motherly care. Not so much Satyavan's father, Bhimasena, but certainly his mother, Shaibya, are concerned with the fate of their son, Satyavan. She is worried about her son. He is staying in the forest. Who will offer him a daughter for marriage? That is one of the greatest care she has immediately. If at all he gets married, it may not be from the royal connections that we will find a girl who would opt for him for this hermitage life. That is her care, motherly care, that this boy, her son, may not find a suitable partner, suitable mate. Therefore, here was woman, once a queen, but now hope nothing for herself from life. Obviously, she doesn't care, she doesn't need anything for herself, but her concern is her son. But all things only hoped for her one child. Calling on the single head from partial fate, all joy of earth, all heaven's beatitude. That is what she will do. She will pray. She will invoke gods to bless her child. All things only hold for her one child. That is her hope. That is her asha. That is her expectation in life, that he will get properly settled in life. Calling on the single head from partial fate, fate had been unkind to them. Fate drove them away from the kingdom and put them in the hermitage, and therefore the partial fate. And it is again that partial fate. She is asking for joy of earth. She is asking for blessings from heaven. The best utterances that can come from high, it is those she is asking for her son. She also wants all the richnesses of the earth to be available to him, who now hope nothing for herself from life, but all things only hope for her one child, calling on a single head from partial freight, all joy of earth, all heaven's beatitude, the excellent happiness, the excellent blessings. It is those she is asking for him. Adoring wisdom and beauty like in gods, she saw him, loved by heaven as by herself. Satyavan's mother is very fond of her son, obviously, and she admires the wisdom of her son, the beauty, the majesty, the princely state of her son, of a young god who looks like a young god. So gods can also become young and old. In other words, his features are godly, are immortal, changeless, and he is of course beautiful. He is of course wise. Saundarya and Jnana both are present in him always. She saw all those attributes in him. She saw him loved by heaven as by herself. These gifts of Saundarya and Jnana, Prajna, they have come to him from heaven itself. She has kind of recognized that, no, this cannot be earthly. They come from somewhere else, from some high place. And her attachment to her son is therefore not only because he is her son, but because he has those wonderful qualities, attributes of heavenly wisdom and beauty. She rejoiced in his brightness and believed in his fate and knew not of the evil drawing near. So the poet is telling us again, look, this lady, she is concerned about her son, but she has no idea of the evil which is coming closer and closer. Satyavan's mother, Satyavan's father also, of course, nobody in the hermitages know that something is going to happen which will be calamitous to him 1 year after the marriage. Nobody has an idea. She rejoiced in his brightness, therefore, in that ignorance, she is happy now. Satyavan's mother is happy now that a bride has walked into her house and her son has a life partner and believed in his fate. Yes, although as a prince he was driven out from the palace, but someone now has come here to build up his life. She rejoiced in his brightness and believed in his fate and knew not of the evil drawing near. As a matter of fact, this evil drawing near is a knowledge remaining only with Savitri and her parents. Nobody in the world has an idea that this is what is going to happen 1 year after the marriage. Savitri's parents-in-law are happy that their son is getting a bride. They were seeing only partial fate, yet has some kind of belief that his nasib, his Qismat, or whatever you want to call it, will flower up and something will happen. But while they were hoping such a thing, and while it had happened, they are oblivious to the event which will take place 1 year after the marriage, and knew not of the evil drawing near. Lingering some days upon the forest worlds, like men who lengthen out departure's pain, unwilling to separate sorrowful clinging hands, unwilling to see for the last time a face, heavy with the sorrow of a coming day, and wondering at the carelessness of fate, who breaks with idle hands the supreme works, they parted from her with pain-fraught, burdened hearts. As forced by inescapable fate, we part from one whom we shall never see again, driven by the singularity of her fate. Helpless against the choice of Savitri's heart, they left her to a rapture and a doom in the tremendous forest, savage charge. Savitri's parents handed her to her parents-in-law. Now it is time for them to go back to their palace. Yet they are staying for some more time, as long as possible, to be in the company of their daughter, of their son-in-law. But it is not going to be for too long. They will have to go back to their palace. So lingering some days upon the forest worlds, like men who lengthen out departure's pain. See, the painful departure is always there, and therefore they want to make it as less as possible by lengthening the span of time. You see, that is the whole idea. You see, unwilling to separate sorrowful clinging hands, unwilling to see for the last time a face heavy with the sorrow of a coming day, heavy with the sorrow of a coming day. Now, they are sorrowful because their loved one they had to leave behind. And that anguish, that pain is understandable. but at the same time with the sorrow of a coming day. Now, this again is a difficult sentence line. Heavy with the sorrow of a coming day. Now, what is this coming day? Obviously, in the larger context, it would mean the day when Satyavan is going to die. Heavy with the sorrow of a coming day. They are therefore sorrowful. They, of course, here would mean now specifically Savitri's parents, Ashwapati and Madhavi, because they are the only people who know about the death of Satyavan. So heavy with the sorrow of a coming day, obviously they feel sorry. Yes, we have done our part of duty. We have got Savitri married. We have handed her over to our parents-in-law. We have to now go back, but that thing keeps on haunting them all the while, that a sorrowful day is also approaching very fast, 1 year after the marriage. Heavy with the sorrow of a coming day and wondering at the carelessness of fate, how fate has manipulated things like that. A person belonging to the royal family now living in a low thatched roof. That itself is a carelessness of fate. Savitri is a Bhagyavati, full of auspicious things in her life, but she has to meet a very difficult situation in her life. And that is also the carelessness of fate. Perhaps behind that carelessness of fate, there is some deeper meaning. Fate is trying to work out something through that carelessness, of which nobody has knowledge. And wondering at the carelessness of fate, who breaks with idle hands the supreme works, that is what fate does. That is what fate has already done in the case of Savitri as first step. They parted from her with pain-fraught, burdened hearts, and forced by inescapable fate, we part from one whom we shall see never again. Driven by the singularity of her fate, helpless again the choice of Savitri's heart, they left her to her rapture and her doom. Singularity of Savitri's fate, the uniqueness, something very exceptional, something most unusual, something which is packed, densely packed in a single point, as if the entire creation has gathered itself into a point of non-existence. A point of non-existence. It is that singularity into which they are seeing now the possibility of a new life unfolding. Driven by the singularity of her fate, helpless against the choice of Savitri's heart, they left her to her rapture and her doom. Left her in the tremendous forest savage charge. Okay, now mind your own fate, live your own life. We don't know what is going to happen to you tomorrow. In that state. Now here, again, the singularity of fate, if it is only a royal convoy, then without the parents, Savitri's parents, then for them it is quite obvious, here is a princess and she is living here now in a hermitage. And that is the kind of a fate which they are surprised at. How this happened, one doesn't know at all. They left her to a rapture and a doom in the tremendous forest savage charge. All put behind her that was once her life. Savitri's parents, they kept aside everything behind, put aside all that was her in the palace at Mathura, once where she was staying. All put behind her that was once her life. So the life of Mathura, that is now the past. The future has to come. So as far as the parents are concerned, they have now kept aside all those things. All put behind her that was once her life. All welcomed that henceforth was his and hers. Now this first all put behind her would mean Savitri's parents. All welcome, all put behind her. So Savitri's parents are keeping behind, are putting aside all that past. But the other all welcomed Satyavan's parents. Savitri's parents-in-law, they are welcoming all. Savitri has walked into their house and she has become a welcome guest. All welcome that henceforth was his and hers, his and her, Savitri's and Satyavan's. The future life of the married couple, it is that which is being welcomed by everybody in the hermitages. All put behind her that was once her life. All welcome that henceforth was his and hers. She abode Satyavan in the wild woods. Priceless she deemed her joy so close to death. She alone knows now about Satyavan's death. But the joy of his companionship is of course priceless, yet so close to death. Priceless she deemed a joy so close to death. Apart with love, she lived for love alone. Death does not come in the picture at all for her. Apart with love, only in the company of love, for love alone she lives here. She abode Satyavan in the wild woods. Priceless she deemed a joy so close to death. Apart with love, she lived for love alone. All put behind her that was once her life. All welcome that henceforth was his and hers. As if self-poised about a march of days, time is not going to stop. But Savitri is self-poised. The days are running swiftly. Savitri is self-poised, content, confident of her steps. As if self-poised about a march of days, her immobile spirit, calm, unperturbed, immobile, she watched the haste of time. Haste of time. For what she is watching? As if she is eager to see the arrival of the day on which Satyavan is going to die. Her moment of truth, it is that she is watching eagerly. Her immobile spirit watched the haste of time, a statue of passion and invincible force, This is what she will be on that fated day. A statue of passion and invincible force, an absolutism of sweet, imperious will, a tranquility and a violence to the gods. It is in the rush of that energy that she is going to meet that hour which is drawing closer. Deemed a joy so close to death, it is a joy, so to say, that she is waiting for her. A tranquility and a violence to the gods, indomitable and immutable. Immobile, self-poised, imperious, invincible, indomitable, immutable, tranquil, violent. These are the kind of attributes of Savitri character on that fated day. It is in that manner that she is going to meet death. Priceless she deemed a joy so close to death. Apart with love, she lived for love alone. As if shall poise above a march of days, her immobile spirit, what the haste of time, a statue of passion and invincible force, an absolutism of sweet, imperious will, a tranquility and a violence to the gods, indomitable and imbued. So that is how the opening section of the book of Yoga brings Savitri to the hermitage where she is going to stay, where she is going to prepare herself to meet the challenge of death.